Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. The National Partnership for Women and Families has played such an important role in improving our healthcare system, protecting and expanding our rights, and ensuring equality and fairness for all on so many fronts. At a time when we're facing such dire threats to our reproductive rights, with legislatures passing extreme abortion bans and for extreme governors signing those into law and seeking to criminalize women's healthcare choices, you all give me hope. Somehow, you've always managed to rise to the challenge, to win so many big fights over time in the face of incredible odds, which means that we can do it again, and we must do it again. We must. When my sister and I were growing up, my mom had something that she always used to say whenever we found ourselves in a tough situation. Be a woman, Lauren. Part reassuring, part instructive, part challenge. The women in my family set the bar pretty high. In rural 1950s Alabama, my Grandma Ann experienced injustice every day, from segregated water fountains and restaurants to limited professional opportunities at the under-resourced, colored-only schools where she taught. And when she was threatened with violence, she marched anyway for justice, for equality, and for full civil rights. Yes, Grandma Ann. Yes. In the 1980s, in Cleveland, Ohio, my other grandmother saw her neighborhood consumed by violence, fueled by the rise of crack cocaine. So she organized and secured resources for a community center, a safe space that offered activities and athletics as alternatives to using and hustling. And it became a light in a very dark time. And then there was my mom, who took the brave step of becoming the first in her family to go to college. When I was growing up, the woman who taught me that being a woman is synonymous with courage and was not, surprisingly, guys, she was strict. Let's just say it what it is. So when a cool new wave pool opened in our hometown of Naperville, Illinois, when I was 8, she insisted that my sister and I finish swim lessons before we could go and play in it. Now, I was a little young to have mastered being a woman at that point. And so that day, we learned how to tread water. I can remember it clear as day. And I got really, really nervous. My heart rate sped up, and literally it didn't slow down. And that is how I found out that I have a heart condition that causes an irregular rhythm, supraventricular tachycardia. Now, my condition is treatable. People have won Olympic medals after being diagnosed with the same thing. Not that I expect to anytime soon. But for a condition like mine to be treated, you have to have access to care, which you also need in order to get diagnosed in the first place. And if I hadn't have access, and if I hadn't had the protections of the ACA, where I would have run into a lifetime cap, or if I'd been denied coverage somewhere along the way, who knows what might have happened or where I'd be today. I wouldn't be here speaking to you as the youngest Black woman ever elected to Congress, and that is for sure. Because access to care saved my life, and the nurses I saw around me growing up showed me how I wanted to spend it. Now, people always ask me if Donald Trump's election inspired me to run for Congress. Now, the truth is, I had already spent the weeks before the election trying to figure out what to do next. I had just turned 30 and had taken a solo trip to South Africa to celebrate. I spent the entire 15-hour flight learning from some all-time great women. An article on Michelle Obama, All the Single Ladies, a book by the great Rebecca Traister, and this book so fundamentally spoke to my experiences. And Ellen Malcolm's book about the beginning days of Emily's List, featuring the legendary Julie Lichtman. I didn't know what was next for my life, but I took inspiration from the stories of these revolutionary women who defied expectations and didn't let our country's limited vision for women's leadership stop their quest for equality, justice, and change. And all of this was going through my mind in the early days of Donald Trump's administration, as I watched the efforts unfold to take our care away and to undo all the progress that we've made. Now, looking back at everything that was happening at that time with the travel ban and our free press under attack, it was terrifying. But I wasn't about to retreat, especially not after I went to my Republican congressman's town hall in April 2017 and heard him promise to protect healthcare coverage for people like me, people with pre-existing conditions. And before going back to DC, he had broken that promise. This made me mad, and more than mad, it made me run for Congress. I knew that my community deserved better leadership and that I could deliver it. But I also knew that I'd have to convince a few other people of that. So one thing I've learned through this process is that when someone doesn't think that you deserve to have decision-making power, they will let you know. They will. And so one of the first conversations I had when I started my campaign was with a local leader who was so doubtful that my district could flip that he spent the entire meeting scrolling through his Facebook like he needed an update on his Candy Crush game. Some things don't have to be said out loud for you to hear the message loud and clear, but a lot of things do get said out loud and online. In fact, just the other day, someone called me a radical feminist, which I think they meant as an insult, but I was flattered. It's like, you see me, you really see me. I was a first-time candidate in a district that no one thought I could win, facing a primary where all 6 of my opponents were men running for a seat that had never been held by a young person, a woman, or a person of color. And believe me, I heard everything. My critics did their worst, but I won anyway. And I learned a powerful lesson, which is that anytime we step into a situation that is not tailor-made for people like us, or gain power certain people don't think that we deserve, or get our foot in the door somewhere that they think that we don't belong, owning what makes us different is the only way that we can prove them wrong. Like Shirley Chisholm said, sometimes when you're not given a seat at the table, you have to show up and you have to bring your own folding chair. And I tell you all this because the reason I'm in Congress today is, well, first, obviously, it's because Ellen Malcolm decided to start a small organization called Emily's List. Maybe you've heard of it. But second, I'm in Congress today because I had a story to tell. And I had a perspective to bring as a woman and as an American with a pre-existing condition that needed to be represented in Congress to protect the rights that we are collectively fighting to keep. And my mom was right. Being a woman courageously in this world that we're in really is the solution to most of our problems most of the time. It's how I got the rules changed for how Congress handles sexual harassment complaints before I was even sworn in. And it's how I was able to form a new Black maternal health caucus with Congresswoman Alma Adams. I was inspired by a good friend from graduate school, Dr. Shalon Irving, who collapsed and passed away from pregnancy-related complications at the age of 36, just 3 weeks after giving birth to a beautiful baby girl. Shalon's death was a wake-up call for me, a reminder that the disparities in our healthcare system for women of color are still shockingly bad, that even a woman like Shalon Irving, a federal employee with a PhD and access to world-class care, who is an expert on disparities, can still lose her own life because of it. And so to me, being a woman means having the courage to raise a once obscure issue, leverage the collective power of the Congress, which now allows this issue to receive the bipartisan attention and presidential campaign promises that it deserves. And being a woman is how we get to this place, where Deb Haaland and I are serving as a part of the most diverse Congress ever, and where we're following in the footsteps of women like Ellen and like Judy and Rosa DeLauro and Shirley Chisholm and my grandma Ann, who showed us that there is a bring your own folding chair option. And seriously, and standing side by side with the National Partnership's Deborah Ness, an amazing leader. In our representative democracy today, women's voices are the loudest, they're the boldest, and the most powerful coming out of the United States Congress. And now all of us and all of you have to use our voices to win the fight of our lives, to defeat these dangerous bans, to protect our access to care, and to defend our rights to safe and legal abortion. Our sacred values, our democracy, and our constitutional rights are at stake. Thank you.